They called it the Final Ultimatum. A shimmering projection of the Galactic Council's High Arbitrator hovered above the ruins of what once was Sydney. The voice was cold, mechanical, not because of a lack of emotion, but because it held no need for it. That voice had judged thousands of species. Billions had surrendered before Earth even understood what was coming. You will lay down your arms. You will dismantle your militaries. You will submit to council assimilation. Resistance will result in orbital purification. The broadcast lasted 2 minutes. All major cities heard it. Every screen, every device, every language translated instantly. And after it ended, Earth just smiled. Not because we were ready. Not because we had fleets to match theirs. Not because we had weapons that could burn stars or soldiers that never slept. No. We smiled because humanity had spent its entire bloody history preparing to be underestimated, and the galaxy had just made the biggest mistake in its history. The man standing in the command center of UN Ground Resistance Command was General Marcus Vane, a scarred, bitter veteran of too many wars. Not the clean kind either. Jungle wars, urban warfare, losing friends in alleyways and pulling triggers in collapsed buildings. He'd seen the worst of people, and that's what made him perfect. He stood silent as the council's message ended. The room around him was dead quiet. Then a junior officer near the back whispered, "They don't know what they just did." Marcus didn't look away from the screen. His voice, low and gravelly, finally broke the silence. Number, they don't, but they will. Humanity's response was broadcast 6 hours later. A single feed. No graphics, no music. Just one camera in a dimly lit room. General Vane stared directly into the lens, expression blank, eyes hollow from decades of war. The kind of man who looked like he'd already buried everyone he ever cared about. "You come here thinking we'll bow, that we'll do what the others did, that we'll fall into your little empire like good little pets. But we're not them. We're the worst decision you'll ever make." He leaned in. "We've killed each other for centuries. You think we'll hesitate with outsiders?" No threats, no demands, just a promise. The council laughed. Literally, their comms leaked a session where representatives mocked Earth's primate bravado. To them, it was cute. The backwater species had barked. Now came the part where they got put down. They sent a fleet. Not even a big one. Just enough to bring Earth to heel. 18 capital ships. Dozens of support cruisers. Thousands of drones. They began atmospheric descent over Europe. London, Berlin, Warsaw, all set for occupation. Then they hit the Krakow trap. It started with Earth's satellites blacking out, not because of jamming, but because humanity shut them off. Voluntarily. On cue. That's when the council ships lost orbital GPS. Earth's network went dark. Deliberate chaos. The first detonation was silent. Space doesn't carry sound. But when the mine laced with Earth-made tungsten rods slammed into a cruiser's underbelly at Mach 25, it turned the ship into confetti. The others tried to scatter, and that's when every damn country on Earth launched their non-existent kinetic payloads. See, humans didn't build massive fleets. We built traps. While the Council flexed with glowing armadas and exotic plasma cannons, we buried tungsten rods, railguns, EMP missiles, and orbital shrapnel in orbit and underground silos, silent for years. All waiting. 6 council ships fell in 20 minutes. The rest tried to retreat. We didn't let them, not because we were stronger, but because Earth doesn't forgive threats. We don't forget ultimatums. And when you give us a reason to fight, we don't stop. As the last cruiser went down in flames, Vane stood once again before the world's only active feed. He didn't smile. He didn't boast. He just looked at the camera and said, "You told us to surrender. We heard you. This is us smiling." The council wasn't afraid. Not yet. They were annoyed. The First Fleet was a message, not a war force, a warning slap to an unruly child. The fact that Earth had swatted that hand away didn't instill fear, only confusion. Species didn't fight back. That was the whole system. Since the Council formed over 10,000 years ago, subjugation had become a routine, not a war. Diplomacy first, pressure next, then one fleet, two if needed. If any race ever resisted more than that, they were burned down, archived as a failed integration, and the galaxy moved on. But Earth was a variable, a wild card, a problem. And problems don't get tolerated in galactic bureaucracy. They get erased. So they sent another fleet, bigger this time. 57 capital ships, 17 dreadnoughts, 3 elite species with cybernetic warforms, coordinated firepower from 5 empires. Their official term for the deployment was Operation Compliance. Off the record, they called it the Hammer. From orbit, the Earth looked fragile. One green-blue marble spinning in void. No interstellar gates, no outer colonies, no real space presence. Just a few orbital relics, junk satellites, and space stations so primitive they still used rotation for gravity. And yet Earth had bloodied the first hand that reached for it. The new fleet didn't bother broadcasting. No warnings, no demands, just targets, coordinates, timelines. Their objective was complete planetary suppression. But in a war room buried 4 miles beneath what used to be Denver, Earth wasn't planning for survival. They were planning for pain. General Marcus Vane stood in front of a cracked whiteboard littered with scribbles, pins, and magnetic counters. Every wall buzzed with dim screens. Officers were positioned at workstations, many with caffeine jitters and unshaven faces. The room stank of metal, sweat, and stress. No one had slept in 2 days. "Run it again," Vane said. A woman in a patched black jacket tapped the console. "Estimated entry in 22 hours. Orbital deployment within 6 dots. Another voice, deeper, older. "Targets?" "They're coming for cities. Big ones, hard and fast. Berlin, Tokyo, Cairo. And they're not landing this time. High-altitude bombardment. EMPs, vacuum imploders, plasma saturators. They're going to soften us before they try boots on the ground." Vane didn't react. Not with panic, not with anger. He'd seen worse. The room waited for his orders. "Let them come." Silence. Then a smirk from one of the younger officers, the kind of smirk men wear when they know they're about to fight dirty. Humanity's greatest weapons weren't ships or lasers or numbers. It was cruelty, patience, the kind of tactical thinking born in mud, trenches, and jungles where you learned to shoot someone not where they were, but where they'd be when they screamed. We were about to show the galaxy what asymmetric warfare really looked like. The attack began at 0430 UTC. A blinding white lance of energy incinerated the skyline of Johannesburg. A second tore through Tokyo's southern district. Air turned to plasma. Buildings melted. Screams died in milliseconds. 3 minutes later, the EMPs hit. Across the globe, power grids collapsed. Satellites died. Civilian tech went dark. But the military systems? Still humming. That was step 1 of Operation Whiplash. Fake the collapse. The Council expected panic. They expected chaos. What they didn't expect were the underground bunkers, the mobile AA grids, the hidden tunnel launchers, the fact that Earth had been preparing for global war since the moment we split the atom. When they started their descent, our skies didn't go quiet. They lit up. From beneath forest canopies, frozen lakes, and mountain ridges, Earth launched its first wave of retaliation. Not nukes, too primitive, too wasteful. Instead, they used sky spears, kinetic kill vehicles designed to punch through armor, not explode. Each one was a shaped rod of dense alloys, accelerated by ancient railgun tech. No energy signatures, no heat trails, undetectable by most council sensors. 4 dreadnoughts lost atmosphere in the first 5 minutes. But Earth's real weapon wasn't metal, it was men. Sergeant Theo Bragg was one of them. Not a hero, not some special forces legend, just a soldier. A survivor of 9 deployments, 2 mutinies, and a failed marriage he never spoke about. He and his unit, the Black Dogs, had been stationed in Iceland since the First Fleet burned. Cold, quiet, invisible. When the second wave began, Bragg didn't ask why. He didn't care about politics or strategy. All he needed was his gear, his rifle, and the target beacon clutched in his shaking hand. "Time to remind these star bastards what a cornered human can do," he muttered, fixing his helmet. Their objective was simple: turn Reykjavik into a meat grinder. The council landed 4,000 troops north of the city, hybrids bred in labs, armored and networked into a hive mind command AI. Fast, strong, precise. They had plasma rifles, adaptive armor, floating drones. Bragg's unit had steel boots, modified ARs, and the kind of tactics that'd get you court-martialed in any real army. "We're setting charges under the east sectors," he barked. "Funneled escape routes are rigged. We bleed 'em in, trap 'em, torch 'em." Another soldier, twitchy, nervous. "They're not like us, Sarge." They don't hesitate. Don't sleep. What if they just blitz through? Bragg lit a cigarette, took one long drag. "Then we die angry and make 'em remember the taste." The traps worked. The aliens moved like wolves, but Earth had built the whole damn city like a snare. Bridges collapsed, streets detonated, buildings fell sideways instead of down, trapped, funneled, isolated. By the time the sun set over the icy hills, only 30 council soldiers remained upright in Reykjavik. And the Black Dogs? Still fighting. Still grinning. Still alive. Back in orbit, panic had started. Not among the grunts, the council elites. Species that hadn't seen real war in centuries. Beings raised on sterile strategies and clean conquests. Now they were watching kill cams filled with human blood. Yes, but also alien corpses ripped apart in trenches, buried in landslides, shredded by primitive bullets that somehow bypassed energy shields. "This is unsustainable," hissed one council representative, a feathered reptilian creature from the core worlds. "They're unrelenting," another muttered. "They're suicidal," a third added. But one word kept being whispered again and again. Adaptable. The humans weren't just fighting. They were learning. Every failed ambush was corrected in the next. Every fallen city taught 10 others how to survive. They didn't surrender. They didn't fracture. They didn't retreat in disarray like previous species had. They coordinated. It was madness. And it was beautiful. General Vane stood over a tactical display showing red dots bleeding into blue clusters. "They're folding on the Western Front. We can take back Madrid and Warsaw." A younger aide walked up, pale-faced. "Sir, the Geneva Protocol bans the type of strikes we're using." Vane didn't even look at him. "Geneva burned. So did the protocol." He turned to another officer. "Send word to the Siberian grid. Activate the sleepers." She blinked. "You mean—" "Yes, time to wake the monsters." Underneath the frozen crust of Siberia lay Vault 6, an unofficial facility that didn't exist. Inside were 24 humanoid figures, cryo-sealed, eyes closed, biological super soldiers, experiments humanity had once sworn off, projects that blended gene splicing, adrenaline feedback loops, and moral collapse. No names, just numbers. And now Earth was ready to use them. The Council would learn what happened when you made a species that spent centuries trying to kill itself turn its rage outward. On the 6th day of the invasion, something unthinkable happened. A Council dreadnought fled. It broke formation. No orders, no coordination. It just turned and fired its sublight drives, bolting into deep space. The feed was intercepted. Its commander, a silicon-based creature named Hithrex, screamed into the void. "They're not a species, they're a disease. They don't stop. They don't stop." He was right. By then, Earth had lost 30 million lives. Entire cities were gone. Yet humanity didn't cry for peace, didn't beg for help. They buried their dead, loaded their rifles, and sent messages across every radio band. You brought the war. Now choke on it. From the slums of Mumbai to the forests of Quebec, from the deserts of the Middle East to the ruins of Manhattan, Earth unified under one creed: fight, burn, bleed, win. Humanity wasn't the apex because of technology. We were the apex because pain was never the end for us. It was where we began. Above the clouds, in the Council's flagship Veraxis, the High Arbitrator finally realized the truth. This wasn't a war. This was a mistake. And they had no idea how to fix it. There's a moment in every war when the tide shifts, not because of numbers or weapons, but because of fear. And for the first time in over 10,000 years, the Galactic Council felt it. Fear, not of extinction, but of humiliation. That a backward, divided, barely spacefaring species from a single gravity well planet had made their entire galactic structure look like a joke. And humanity wasn't done. Not even close. They'd tasted alien blood, and it wasn't the first time humans had gotten drunk off vengeance. In orbit, the surviving Council ships pulled back into what they called strategic containment. But every ship commander knew what it really meant. Retreat. They masked it behind phrases. Tactical regrouping. Redeployment. Atmospheric reevaluation. But Earth wasn't buying it. General Marcus Vane stood over a table littered with shattered hard drives, maps, and old photos of cities that no longer existed. A bottle of whiskey sat near his hand, untouched for now. He was watching drone footage, shredded alien corpses across scorched fields in Kansas, Council gunships burning in the Rockies, and resistance fighters dragging hybrid bodies behind supply trucks in Mexico City. A comlink buzzed. "Sir, they're hesitating. The fleet hasn't moved in 3 hours." Vane rubbed his jaw. "They're waiting for reinforcement or surrender. They'll get neither." A pause. Permission to launch Operation Gauntlet? Vane looked at the whiskey again. Thought about all the men he'd buried, all the faces he couldn't remember names for anymore. Then he answered, "Do it. Light the sky." Operation Gauntlet was never meant to exist. It was a whisper, a what-if cooked up in the darker corners of black site think tanks. The idea was simple, in theory. Get off Earth. Take the fight to orbit. Not with ships, with soldiers. But the execution was madness. The Council controlled space. Their sensors blanketed the sky. Their AI could predict and intercept most projectile launches. But humanity had one thing. They didn't. Desperation. In a scrapyard north of Alaska, 6 Orion drop lances were prepped. Not starships, not even shuttles. Modified ICBMs. Stripped of nukes, reinforced with graphene armor plating. Life support systems barely held together with duct tape and hope. Each missile carried 3 men, no room for failure, no backup. The idea was to launch straight through the thermosphere, deploy magnetic boots, and board the Council's mid-orbit vessels by force. Suicidal? Yes. But to the 6 squads strapped inside those hollowed-out death rockets, that was the point. Sergeant Theo Bragg was in Gauntlet 3. His boots were clamped, his hands were shaking. The woman next to him, Corporal Nyla Dress, was mumbling an old prayer. The third in their pod, Lieutenant Reese, was staring at the blinking green light above the hatch. No one spoke about surviving. That wasn't the mission. Survival wasn't victory. Pain was. 30 seconds, came the cold voice in their earpieces. Bragg let out a slow breath. We go in hard. We don't stop. We take the bridge or we die on it. Got it? Both nodded. 20 seconds. The rumble started. Metal screamed. Then, ignition. In orbit, the Veraxis was rotating on its lateral axis, engines cooling after a partial system diagnostic. The command bridge was calm, sterile. Everything in the Council's world was clean, even in war. A comms officer, a crystalline species with 7 eyes, suddenly stiffened. Unidentified launches from the surface, it said. Origin? The arbitrator asked. Multiple trajectories. Vertical ascent. But, wait, they're not aircraft. What are they? The officer's voice broke protocol, a rare flicker of confusion. Rockets, human-made. The room tensed. How many? 6. A silence, followed by laughter from a Krithan warlord standing nearby. 6? That's all? This is the retaliation? But then the officer continued. They're accelerating. Too fast, too narrow. They're boarding projectiles. Now no one laughed. By the time they tried to activate defensive auto turrets, it was too late. 3 of the rockets were shot down. 1 missed completely, but 2, they hit home. Gauntlet. 2 slammed into the Ithra, a Dreadnought-class war cruiser. Gauntlet 3, Bragg's pod, pierced the outer hull of the Veraxis like a steel fang. The impact wasn't elegant. The pod shredded half its hull before it lodged between 2 decks. Bragg was knocked half-conscious, blood pouring from his nose. But the hatch was blown open with a charge, and the first thing he saw when he stood up was a terrified alien crawling backward, sputtering in its own tongue. He didn't hesitate. 1 shot, head gone. No words, no mercy. Breach complete, Reese grunted. Clear. They advanced through a corridor lit in red emergency lights. Gas hissed from vents. Sirens wailed in alien frequencies. Council guards poured in. Bragg's squad didn't bother with cover. They advanced. Tight angles. Suppressed fire. Every round meant something. A shot to the leg was followed by a knife to the throat. Reese kicked a plasma turret offline. Dress rigged an ion charge to a ceiling panel and collapsed half a hallway. They were moving like monsters. Humans. The Council tried to call for reinforcements. But Earth's hackers, working from frozen data centers buried in Antarctica, had already infiltrated their comm relays. Static, screams, disinformation. One ship thought Earth had detonated an antimatter bomb. Another thought their own fleet was compromised. Chaos. Just how humanity liked it. Meanwhile, on Earth, cities were burning and rebuilding at the same time. While bombs fell in Cairo, underground factories were spitting out new railguns. While the Council bombarded the ruins of Paris, resistance cells from Poland were launching guerrilla strikes into enemy field camps. And in North America, Vault 6's Project Revenant was fully operational. The super soldiers, numbers 1 to 24, were loose. They didn't talk, didn't question. They moved with cold precision through Canada, cutting down elite alien squads like lawnmowers through wet grass. Some of the kills weren't tactical. They were cruel. Bodies were left hanging upside down. Message banners carved in alien tongues reading, "Is this what conquest tastes like?" Even Earth's own generals started fearing the revenants, but none dared stop them. You don't leash a monster halfway through a war. Back on the Veraxis, Bragg's team finally reached the central elevator. Drees was wounded, leg torn open from shrapnel. Reese was bleeding from his temple. Bragg loaded his last magazine. "Bridge is 1 level up." "We're outnumbered," Reese muttered. "We always are." Elevator doors opened. They charged. The council symbol flickered on the hollow screens. Bragg stepped forward, looked into the security cam. Knew someone out there was watching. "This ship belongs to Earth now." Then he raised the council's own banner and burned it. The footage spread faster than the council could censor it. Every world, every outpost, every colony that had once feared the council saw that moment. A human soldier, standing on the bridge of the flagship, covered in blood, fire behind him, and the symbol of galactic order reduced to ash in his hand. That was the day the galaxy shifted. Some planets started questioning the council, some started rebelling, and others started listening to Earth's broadcasts, because Earth wasn't offering peace. It was offering freedom, and that offer was paid in blood. By the 7th day, the galaxy was no longer watching a war. They were watching a collapse. The council had spent millennia crafting an empire built on obedience, control through structure, dominance through legacy. Not fear, not respect, just a simple, unspoken rule. Do not resist. And then Earth did, over and over again. And now their finest ship, the Veraxis, was broadcasting footage of its own bridge under human control. The council's symbol, a centuries-old seal of order, lay in pieces across the floor while bloodied soldiers stared into their cameras like demons returned from hell. Every planet connected to the council saw it. Every species that had once been broken into silence by those sleek dreadnoughts and polished diplomats watched as one man, a soldier, a nothing, a nobody, lit a fire inside their cold-blooded fear. And Earth? Earth was smiling, not because they were winning, but because now they had permission to go further. Sergeant Theo Bragg stood at the center of the captured bridge. His helmet was off, and his face was cracked and pale. Dirt smeared across his jawline, blood dried at the corner of his lip. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Because he hadn't. Around him, the remaining council crew had been zip-tied or executed. The air smelled like copper, ozone, and burned flesh. Reese was slumped in the corner, eyes closed, blood dripping from his ear. Alive, barely. Dress had passed out, her leg elevated, a tourniquet cutting off circulation. Bragg tapped into the ship's interface using a jacked-up translator rig Earth had hacked together using salvaged alien tech. It wasn't clean. The screens glitched every few seconds. Sometimes words came out backward. But it worked. He broadcast a short message on a council-wide encrypted frequency, one humanity had no business having access to. "Your fleet's flagship is ours. Your command is dead. If you want this ship back..." He leaned in close to the console. "Come and take it." Then he disabled the fail-safes, opened the docking clamps, and armed the warhead in the reactor core. If they tried to recapture the Veraxis, it wouldn't be a rescue. It'd be a funeral. Far below, General Marcus Vane was watching everything from a dark, concrete bunker deep under what was left of the Rocky Mountains. One eye on the feed, the other on the red, blinking lights that marked alien troop movements across Europe and Asia. The council had slowed down. Pullback was obvious now. Less aggression. Less orbital fire. Their remaining forces were consolidating, preparing for something. A last push? A retreat? Didn't matter. Earth wasn't waiting. "We've been playing defense too long," Vane said to his war council. "Time to go hunting." The map zoomed in. Dozens of red zones marked alien landing sites still active across Earth. Forward operations in Siberia, refueling hubs in the Sahara, communications towers in South America. Task Force Odin will handle the Russian cell. Revenants to Africa, Black Dogs to Brazil. Every city we lost, we take it back. A young analyst raised a hand. "Sir, these are fortified zones. We don't have air superiority, and our supply chains are—" Vane cut him off. "We have anger." Another general leaned in. "It's not a strategy." Vane stared at him, eyes like stones. "It is now." In São Paulo, a council garrison of 12,000 troops had turned the city into a military fortress. Energy barriers, drones, AI-controlled defense nodes. No one expected a human counterattack. Not there. Not yet. Until it came. From below. Sewers, subways, collapsed tunnels. The Black Dogs had spent weeks tunneling under the wreckage with civilian construction equipment and salvaged explosives. When they blew the first charges, the ground opened like hell's mouth. The aliens were pulled into hand-to-hand combat before they even realized the alarms were real. Bricks smashed into helmets. Shrapnel tore through armor. And when the Council's reinforcements arrived from orbit, human jammers blinded their orbital targeting systems. A single flare went up from the roof of a shattered skyscraper. Green. Then dozens more. Earth's ancient missile silos, once rotting and unused, came alive again. And from the ground, the sky burned. But the fight wasn't just physical. Earth had learned something else, something deeper, something far more dangerous. The Council wasn't built for psychological warfare. Their enemies always broke. But humans didn't. They broke and got meaner. They didn't fold. They fractured into sharper pieces. So humanity began broadcasting targeted messages directly into Council channels, military and civilian. No threats, no politics, just truth. They showed images of Council war crimes, dead children, glassed villages, tortures. They revealed intercepted messages between Council commanders laughing about training the monkeys and breaking the planet like a wild dog. And the worst? A video feed of a captured human prisoner, 14 years old, tied down, interrogated, screaming. He didn't give up names. He died silent. The Council tried to discredit the footage. Didn't work. Because deep down, every species under Council rule had always feared they were the next in line. And now Earth wasn't just fighting back. Earth was winning. In orbit, Council reinforcements finally arrived. A fleet of 200 ships, mostly automated, AI-led, cold, and calculated. They surrounded Earth like vultures. Every major city got one target lock. A final demand was sent to humanity. "We will purge this planet. Last chance." The message was heard by billions, but Earth never answered. Instead, a civilian feed appeared on Council frequencies. A man stood in front of a pile of rubble that used to be his home. His wife's body was half buried behind him, blood down his face, a shotgun in his hand. He said nothing. He just spat at the camera and walked away. That was Earth's answer. So the Council prepared to fire. But before they could, the Veraxis moved. The flagship, controlled by Bragg's barely functioning squad, drifted slowly into firing range of the Council fleet. Its reactor was primed, its weapons online. They thought it was posturing, until the dreadnought targeted one of its own, a Council battleship called the Juturan, and fired. Point blank. The battleship detonated like a dying sun. Then Earth's secret was revealed. They hadn't just taken the Vairaxis. They'd reverse-engineered its targeting systems. Now Earth had orbital firepower. That night, the skies over Earth were lit with more color than the northern lights. Council ships burned and fell like dying gods, and across the galaxy, hundreds of species under Council control stood up. Minor riots at first, then revolts, then governments flipped. The Council tried to silence them, but it was like trying to dam an ocean with a sheet of paper. Earth had done more than fight back. They'd exposed a lie, that the Council was unbeatable, untouchable, unbreakable. But now? Now the galaxy saw the truth. They bled like anyone else, they burned like anyone else, and they ran, just like anyone else. On the 10th day of the war, General Marcus Vane sent a single message, broadcast across Council territory. His face was tired, scarred, hardened. This isn't peace, this isn't surrender, this is justice. He leaned forward. And if you're still loyal to the Council, we're coming. The first Council world to fall wasn't conquered. It defected. The planet Luroth Prime, a blue and gold sphere nestled in the Epsilon Divide, had been under Council control for 400 years. Its native species, the Thren, were a lithe, four-limbed people known for docility and cooperation, once praised by Council diplomats as a model civilization. But the Thren had watched Earth fight. They'd seen humans bleed in the streets and still stand tall. And when their own Council governor ordered their cities to send support troops to aid the invasion of Earth, something cracked. A Thren elder walked into the governor's estate and slit his throat with a ceremonial blade. Broadcast it live, then set the palace on fire. Within 24 hours, Luroth Prime declared secession from the Galactic Council and offered full diplomatic alliance to humanity without being asked. General Marcus Vane didn't blink when the news came through. He just looked over the updated map. "Mark it green," he said. Green meant ours. It had started. The break. The splintering. And Earth was the wedge. Sergeant Theo Bragg wasn't back on Earth yet. He hadn't left the Vairaxis. Not because he couldn't, but because he wouldn't. Since the capture, Council forces had made 4 separate attempts to retake the flagship. All had failed. Each time the attacking teams had been lured in, misdirected through corrupted blueprints, and slaughtered by a combination of improvised traps and the last 2 surviving humans on board. Bragg and Drezes Reese had died on the 2nd day. Took 4 of them with him. His body was still strapped into a chair near the rear of the bridge, wrapped in Earth's old flag. The place was starting to stink. Bragg didn't care. The Vairaxis had become a floating symbol of humiliation for the Council. They had sent commands to self-destruct it remotely. Bragg had disabled those systems. They tried EMP detonations. He had rerouted power from internal reserves and laughed as the lights came back on. And when they finally tried to starve him out, cutting off supply drones, he opened an airlock, dragged the corpse of a dead alien to the viewport, and began eating raw meat while staring into the nearest enemy ship's camera feed. Let them watch. Let them learn. This was a human war now. On Earth, Operation Reclaim had entered Phase 3. Cities were being taken back. But not with armies. With examples. In Johannesburg, Earth's resistance fighters didn't kill the Council's puppet administrator. They paraded him through the streets, made him confess to every betrayal, every order, every human he turned in, then handed him over to the survivors of his labor camps. They didn't even film what happened next. Didn't need to. The silence said enough. In Riyadh, the revenants were unleashed without limits, no chain of command, no oversight. They moved like shadows. 3 cities went dark in 48 hours. Alien outposts once filled with Council pride were now bonfires of twisted steel and crushed helmets. One drone feed showed a revenant walking calmly into a fortified command tower, head tilted like a curious animal, blood dripping from its gloves, no weapon in sight, just silence, and the scream of council officers before the feed cut out. Word spread. Among council soldiers, new slang emerged. Don't get earthed. It meant being slaughtered without warning, without logic, without mercy. Panic started to fester. Then something far worse. Doubt. In the stars above, a council emergency summit was called in orbit over D-Raxis 4. 15 species, all high command. The chamber was filled with heat and tension, not because of politics, but because for the first time, no one knew who was still loyal. "What are we fighting?" one delegate demanded. "What are these humans?" No one answered. Another said, "They do not follow the rules of war. They kill prisoners. They broadcast executions. They strike without honor." Another voice replied, "And we're losing. What does your honor get us now?" Silence. Until the high strategist of the council, an old six-armed monstrosity bred in a war moon, finally spoke. "We miscalculated." Heads turned. They are not primitive. They are not fractured. They are not bound by fear like the others. They are a wounded animal backed into a corner. He looked around the room, all eyes on him. "And we taught them to hate us." Meanwhile, in a dark hangar buried beneath the Appalachian Mountains, Earth was preparing something worse than weapons, something more powerful than ships or super soldiers. Propaganda, not the kind that lied, the kind that told the truth, loudly, publicly, and without apology. Earth's top editors, hackers, and former journalists were gathered under one mission: destroy the myth of the Galactic Council. They dug into archives, retrieved footage, found witness reports, showed entire worlds the colonization of the Vexar system, where council ships gassed over 1.2 million civilians to maintain galactic harmony. They showed images of species sterilized for non-compliance. They aired testimonies from refugees who had never even heard of rebellion until Earth stood up. These broadcasts were dubbed Fireside Wars because every single one lit a spark. Across the galaxy, species started burning council outposts, deserting, sabotaging ships from the inside. And always, on every hacked frequency, came the voice of Marcus Vane. "You are not alone. You are not weak. You are not slaves. You are not next. You are now." Back on the Veraxis, Bragg knew the clock was ticking. Dress had gone unconscious days ago. The power systems were failing, reactor running too hot. More council ships were surrounding them now, but they didn't engage. They watched. He had one last message to send. Not a plea, not a warning, just a promise. He activated the beacon. "This ship is now the tomb of every council lie. Burn it, and you burn your legacy." He pulled Dress into an escape pod, wired the pod to a manual override, and set a countdown timer on the core. Then he scrawled 3 words into the wall next to the pod hatch, using the blood on his knuckles. "Tell them why." He shoved the pod into space and locked himself back into the bridge. The countdown ticked. 5 minutes. He lit a cigarette, the last one from a half-crushed box. Smoked in silence. He wasn't suicidal. He was deliberate. This was the cost. This was the coin. Humans didn't just win wars with strength. They won with sacrifice. And 5 minutes later, the Veraxis, symbol of the Galactic Council's invincibility, exploded in a burst of white light that cracked the void like a god's funeral. The escape pod drifted for 13 hours. It was picked up by an Earth salvage ship called the Banshee's Mercy. Inside, Dress was barely breathing, but alive. In her hand was a small data drive, Bragg's final message. It wasn't sent to Earth, it was broadcast to the galaxy. Every screen, every ship, every station, one video, just Bragg's face, half-burned, eyes alive with fire. "You can't conquer us. You can't cage us. You can't understand us. We're not here to join your council. We're here to end it." And he smiled. When the Veraxis died, something ancient died with it, the illusion of control. For thousands of years, the council had ruled not with brute force, but with certainty, that if they arrived, you submitted. If they threatened, you obeyed. If they punished, you stayed punished. But Sergeant Theo Bragg had destroyed their crown jewel and gone out on his own terms, a human soldier turning a warship into a funeral pyre. And in doing so, he'd ripped a hole in the council's psyche. They didn't just lose a flagship. They lost their myth, because every tyrant needs one thing more than weapons: belief. And now? The galaxy didn't believe anymore. The revolt spread like an infection. On the sulfur plains of Dromaxis, slave miners turned their pickaxes into weapons and burned their council supervisors alive inside their exosuits. On the ocean world of Khatun, a species that hadn't spoken aloud in over 300 years, screamed in unison as they capsized council skimmers and drowned their guards in deep-water trenches. And on Narthil IX, a former council weapons depot, an entire military garrison defected overnight, left their posts, broadcast a new flag in the sky, a fractured earth with fire rising behind it, the symbol of resistance, the symbol of what Earth had started. General Marcus Vane stood before a table in a concrete war room beneath the remains of old Washington, D.C. They'd removed the last alien forward command center from North America 2 days ago. Now they were planning expansion. Not for territory, for destruction. Vane's voice was low and calm. "Every planet the Council used to suppress its rule, we take them next, one by one, burn their supply lines, cripple their fleet reserves. If they want a war, we make it cost." He paused, then pointed to a red dot near the edge of the system. "Starting with Draxis Core." Someone in the room flinched. It wasn't just a military target. It was symbolic. A council-breeding world, used for officer academies, indoctrination, propaganda. "Sir," one commander said, "that planet is fortified. Defenses buried in orbital rings. We can't take it with missiles, and we don't have ships." Vane nodded slowly. "Then we don't bring ships." He slid a black folder across the table. Its name, Operation Gutterfire. The plan was madness. Of course it was. That's why it would work. Step 1. Deploy orbital wreckage from destroyed Council ships in a disguised meteor pattern. Step 2. Hide troops inside the wreckage. Step 3. Crash the soldiers into the planet under the guise of debris. Not land on the world. Invade it from orbit like falling knives. No dropships, no fanfare. Just human steel inside burning husks of alien metal. Silent until it was too late. The teams selected for Gutterfire were not elite. They were worse. They were the unwanted, former convicts, dishonorably discharged, too unstable for command, too violent to let go. Now, they were the perfect weapon. The leader of Gutterfire Unit 9 was a man known only as Granger. No rank, no history in the public archives. Rumor said he once tore a commanding officer's jaw off with a mess kit for ordering a retreat. Now he wore a half-broken oxygen mask at all times, not because he needed it, but because no one had ever seen his face, and he liked it that way. When his capsule was sealed into a piece of fused Veraxis plating, he smiled. Didn't speak, didn't pray, just cracked his neck and whispered, "Let's break their gods." When the debris entered Draxis Core's atmosphere, no alarms sounded. The Council watched the sky and saw old junk. After all, they'd glassed dozens of Earth cities. It made sense that their garbage would start falling back to planets. But then the junk began to steer. Right before impact, internal ignition units fired. Panels split open. Troop compartments snapped free like claws, and in 23 impact zones across the planet's upper hemisphere, Earth soldiers rose from the craters like demons crawling out of graves. The Council didn't even have time to scramble air patrols before Granger's unit had leveled their communications tower with salvaged alien explosives. Then they moved toward the barracks. Quiet, efficient, no prisoners. They weren't there to conquer. They were there to ruin. On Earth, people didn't celebrate the victory, not loudly. They watched the fires on Draxus Core burn from space feed relays, watched the transmissions cut off one by one. And then they went back to digging graves, rebuilding homes, raising new walls. This wasn't a victory parade. This was vengeance. Humanity wasn't fighting for pride. They were fighting because no one else would have spared them. Now it was their turn not to spare anyone. By the third week, the Council's grip had shattered in 19 systems. But the true death blow came from somewhere unexpected. From within. A mid-level logistics officer named Till Rak, species unknown, defected from the Council and handed over a full backup of their internal fleet supply database. He didn't ask for asylum, didn't want protection. His message was short. I watched my planet die under your guns. You told me it was for peace. Now I will help them burn you. The files revealed the locations of every major Council refueling station, every hidden outpost, every unregistered forward base, and, most importantly, the exact coordinates of the Spire, the true heart of the Galactic Council, not public, not ceremonial, the real command center, buried inside a hollow moon, shielded by a gravity distortion field, untouched for 11,000 years. Earth had its target. General Vane stood before Earth's first orbital shipyard, still under construction, half-patched together with scrap and fire-hardened welds. The workers stopped when he arrived. He looked up at the half-built cruiser above him. Burnt steel, jagged lines, an engine that screamed rather than hummed. And then he said the name out loud for the first time. The Bragg. It would be Earth's first interstellar assault vessel, and it wouldn't be beautiful. It would be angry. Back on Draxus Core, Granger's team had finished their work. Nothing left to burn. The academies were ash. The propaganda towers crumbled. The children of officers had been evacuated. Some units said they'd let them go. Others didn't. No one asked questions. Granger stood at the top of the former Spire of Harmony, now shattered in half, and broadcast to every planet still loyal to the Council. This is what happens when you raise your children in palaces built on bones. We're not asking for surrender. We're offering extinction. The galaxy had changed. Fear didn't live in alien minds anymore. It lived in Council hearts, and in dark corners of the void, where new species once prayed for mercy, they now whispered one word with hope. Earth. There was no more doubt. Not in the stars, not in the Council, not even in the dark, cracked corners of alien war rooms where species once scoffed at Earth's defiance. Now they feared it. Because Earth didn't fight like a military. They didn't operate by rules or doctrine or fleet formations. Earth fought like a thing wounded so deeply it forgot how to die. And in its place, a fire had grown, hungry, patient, intelligent. Worse than rage. Purpose. The Council's death wasn't an explosion. It was a slow bleed. In the past 30 days, humanity and its allies had crippled 61 forward operating bases, intercepted 13 fuel convoys, and publicly executed 4 captured Council generals, streamed directly into the entertainment feeds of their own citizens. Not one human asked for forgiveness. Not one message ended with mercy. In fact, the only words repeated in every broadcast were, "We remember everything." It was never a war cry. It was a curse. At the edge of known space, the Spire sat like a forgotten god. The true heart of the Galactic Council, a buried moon wrapped in stealth tech, energy distortion, and ancient shielding systems that not even their best engineers fully understood. For 11,000 years, no enemy had even seen the spire. Now Earth was coming for it. The newly finished battlecruiser Bragg, scarred, uneven, rage-forged, was loaded with every last piece of tech humanity had stolen, re-engineered, or improvised from its enemies. No polish, no finesse, just killing potential in steel form. General Marcus Vane stood at its prow, clad in matte black armor. No insignia, no medals, nothing to mark him as a man who'd led the greatest military comeback in galactic history. He didn't need to look like a legend. He was the reason legends existed now. The spire wasn't undefended. They had expected a strike eventually, and they were ready. Or so they believed. 39 council ships formed the last ring of defense. Not AI-controlled anymore, not automated, manned. They had learned too late that humans broke machines, and so they'd turned to their own people. But people were softer than they remembered, and humans didn't come alone. They brought others. The first ally to arrive was the Larothi rebellion fleet, cobbled together, ugly, and wildly unstable. But they were free. Next came the Thren, then the exiles from Narthil 9, then splinter units from 6 other species long thought too beaten to resist. Not organized, not trusted, but present. They didn't come because they loved Earth. They came because Earth gave them the courage to hate again, and hate is fuel when hope is lost. The battle began not with an attack, but a question. Vane sent a final message to the Council, broadcast directly to the spire. You asked us to surrender. You glassed our cities. You executed our people on live feeds and laughed. Now we ask you one thing. Do you still believe you're in control? No reply. Just target locks. Vane smiled and gave the order. The Bragg fired first. Not plasma, not lasers. A mass driver cannon, repurposed from an asteroid-piercing drill, now weaponized with depleted uranium slugs the size of cargo trucks. It wasn't elegant. It was obliteration. The first Council cruiser didn't explode. It caved in, twisted like tin under the pressure of a god's hammer. The Larothi fleet charged next, flying low and tight, sacrificing shielding for speed. 2 were hit by Council fighters. 4 made it through and began dumping reactor cores into the enemy hulls. A tactic stolen from Earth. Self-detonation over surrender. Human pilots followed behind in armored dropships, slugging it out with capital ships like they belonged in the ring. And then, through the carnage, came the signal. The Revenants had landed. Operation Pale Night had begun. Vault 6's remaining super soldiers had been launched via high-velocity rail pods, drilled directly into the spire's outer structure like hypersonic nails. 20 pods, 20 monsters. They came through the walls, covered in concrete dust and blood, tearing apart the first line of guards in under a minute. The Council's last elite units, the Echelon Guard, met them in the central corridor. The fight was brief. Bodies were not removed. They were displayed. Every Revenant carried a blade, not because it was effective, but because fear bleeds better when it's personal. In a chamber at the top of the spire, the last true Chancellor of the Council sat still, watching the war feeds collapse one by one. He didn't speak, didn't pray. He just stared at the final image of Earth's flag, crude, imperfect, fire-lined, and whispered, "We should have ended them when they were still animals." His last view was a human face entering the chamber, mask cracked, eyes feral. The Chancellor raised a hand. The human raised a knife. That was the end of the Galactic Council. But Earth didn't stop there. Not yet. Because victory, to humans, isn't just the end of an enemy. It's the lesson burned into the bones of history. They didn't rebuild the spire. They pulled it apart, one steel beam at a time, melted its systems, erased its archives, flooded its tunnels, and in its place they left a crater, marked with nothing but a slab of stone, carved in every galactic language. No gold, no ceremony, no claims, just one line. Let this be a warning to the next empire. Back on Earth, Vane walked alone through the ruins of what used to be Chicago. No cameras, no speeches, just broken streets and memories buried in rubble. He lit a cigarette, sat on the edge of a collapsed parking structure, looked up. No more ships overhead. No more threats. Just sky. For the first time in history, the stars belonged to humanity. Not through exploration, not through trade, but through the one truth no one had dared say before Earth bled. The galaxy doesn't respect peace, it respects pain. There were no parades, no anthem played from orbit, no fireworks over a united Earth. Because this wasn't that kind of victory. The war was over, but what came after wasn't peace. It wasn't unity, it was reckoning. And no one felt it deeper than General Marcus Vane. He didn't return home. He didn't even know if he had one. After the collapse of the Galactic Council, humanity stood on the edge of something they'd never had before. A galaxy that feared them. Not respected. Feared. And like all men who had seen too much war, Vane understood something no one else wanted to admit. Fear doesn't last. It rots. And then it grows teeth. In the months that followed the destruction of the Spire, Earth didn't rise into a golden age. They rose into an empire of ghosts. 1,000 broken allies now looked to them for protection, for power, for structure. Earth gave them none of that. Instead, it gave them a warning. The humans didn't rebuild the Council's systems. They dismantled them, one by one. Every taxation node, every surveillance grid, every compliance AI gone. They didn't want to replace the empire they'd burned down. They just wanted to make sure no one ever built one again. Sergeant Theo Bragg's name became legend, not because he survived. He didn't. But because the image of his blood-soaked smile staring into the Council's flagship camera lived in every rebel ship, every cracked screen, every campfire story told on liberated worlds. The man who spat in the face of an empire and lit it on fire. They said he died without screaming. They said he died grinning. Whether it was true didn't matter. The idea of him was enough. And ideas like that? They don't die. The revenants weren't decommissioned. Earth didn't know how to unmake them. Some disappeared into the outer systems, rumored to be hunting down Council war criminals in deep space. Others returned to Earth and were never heard from again. The ones who stayed didn't speak, didn't salute, didn't sleep. One stood at the crater where the Spire used to be and didn't move for 47 hours. Then he walked into the darkness of space without a suit and vanished. No one followed. No one asked. You don't question the things that win your wars. You just try to survive them. And what about Earth? The people? The ones who didn't fight but lived through fire? They did what humans always do. They kept going. Built with what they had. Loved who they could. Hated what they remembered. Some cities returned. Some never did. There were children now. Some born in bunkers. Some born in silence after the orbital strikes. They'd never seen a Council cruiser. Never seen their skies filled with death. But they knew. Because Earth didn't hide its scars. It tattooed them into the stone. Every city had a memorial wall. But they weren't for the heroes. They were for the forgotten. The names with no bodies. The screams no one recorded. The ashes that never made it home. In the ruins of Sydney, there was one such wall. And that's where Vane went. 1 year to the day after the war ended. No guards, no officers, just a man in black standing beneath the names. He wasn't there to be remembered. He was there to remember. A small boy walked up beside him, Didn't say anything, just stared at the names, too. "Your father up there?" Vane asked. The boy nodded. "So's mine." Silence. Then the boy looked up. "Were they soldiers?" Vane didn't answer right away. Then, "Mine wasn't." The boy looked confused. "What was he?" Vane looked at the wall, and for the first time in years, his voice cracked. "Human." That was the thing no one outside Earth ever understood. Humanity didn't win because of power, or ships, or technology. They won because when everything was taken from them, when every child was buried, every home turned to dust, they didn't break. They became something worse than defiant. They became righteous. In the aftermath of the war, the galaxy tried to reorganize. Species came together, talked about forming a new order. One by one, they invited Earth to the table. One by one, Earth declined. "We've seen what happens when power sits too long in one place. Build something new, but don't ask us to rule it." Some respected the answer. Some didn't. Some whispered behind closed doors. Humanity is too dangerous to remain free. And that's when Earth did something no one expected. They opened the archives, released every war file, every internal feed, every torture, every name of every alien officer who signed off on an execution or a planetary strike. And they made it clear, "We have no empire, but if you ever try to build one again, we will be your end. Again." In deep space, far beyond mapped lanes, a small probe drifts. It plays one audio loop on repeat, in every known language, the last message of humanity's war. "You came for us with arrogance. You called us animals. You demanded surrender." And Earth smiled. "If you come again, we'll smile harder." The stars burned cold and silent above the shattered remnants of Earth's fleet. A graveyard of twisted metal and dying lights sprawled across the void. The commander stood at the helm of the Dauntless, humanity's last ship. Its hull battered and creaking from a war it wasn't built to fight alone. His hands gripped the console, knuckles white, as the holodisplay flickered with the enemy's approach. Thousands of Krenari warships, their jagged forms slicing through the dark like the claws of some relentless beast. The crew around him moved in tense silence, faces pale, breaths shallow. They knew what was coming. They'd known for weeks. Yet here they stood, a lone ember of defiance against an armada that had crushed entire systems without a flicker of hesitation. His jaw tightened as he replayed the moment it all unraveled. 3 months back, humanity had launched their grand stand. Hundreds of ships, the shining pride of the Terran coalition, sent to wrest the Orion Verge from the Krenari dominion. It was meant to be a turning point, a bold thrust to prove Earth's people wouldn't kneel to tyranny. Instead, it was a massacre. The Krenari had been ready, their trap sprung with ruthless precision. Wave after wave of human vessels crumbled, their comms a cacophony of screams and static, until only silence remained. He'd watched it all from the Dauntless, ordered to hold the rear while the admirals squandered lives on arrogance and bad intel. Now he was the last one left, carrying the weight of that failure like a stone in his chest. "Commander," a voice cut through his thoughts. Lieutenant Mara Voss, her sharp green eyes locked on the sensor readouts. "They're accelerating. ETA 30 minutes. We can't outrun them and we can't fight that many." Her tone held steady, but he caught the faint quiver beneath it, the same fear clawing at every soul on the ship. She was right. The Dauntless was a heavy cruiser, built to endure, not to flee. Its guns could tear through a Krenari frigate, but against a fleet this size? It was a whisper against a hurricane. He turned to her, forcing calm into his voice for their sake. "Then we don't run, and we don't fight like they expect. We make them bleed for every step they take." The words rang hollow even to him. But he saw a spark flare in Mara's gaze, mirrored in the crew's weary faces. They were exhausted, broken, terrified, but they were human, and humans didn't fade quietly. The truth, though, was a burden he couldn't share. Not yet. The Dauntless wasn't the last ship by accident. It was the last by design. Buried deep in its engineering deck, behind locks only he could open, lay humanity's final play. The Genesis Protocol. A weapon so monstrous, so unthinkable, the Coalition had hidden it even from their own leaders. He'd only learned of it days ago, when a dying captain's transmission broke through the noise, her voice ragged as she whispered the codes and pleaded with him to use it well. "It's not victory," she'd said, choking on her own blood. "It's survival, whatever it takes." He hadn't wanted to believe her. The Genesis Protocol wasn't a cannon or a bomb. It was a system killer, a cascade of antimatter and strange particles that could shred a star and its planets in minutes. The Crenari had driven humanity to the brink. But this was a line he wasn't sure he could cross. Billions of lives, enemy or otherwise, gone in a flash. For what? A slim hope that some shred of Earth's people might crawl out of the wreckage? The thought pressed on him, a cold, suffocating weight no battle had ever matched. "Commander!" Mara's shout yanked him back. The holodisplay blazed red as the Crenari fleet split into three, encircling them like predators on a dying prey. "They're locking weapons. Orders?" He stared at the screen, the enemy's numbers crushing, their intent unmistakable. He felt the crew's eyes on him, waiting for a miracle he didn't have. Or did he? The Genesis Protocol throbbed in his mind, a temptation and a terror in one. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words faltered as a new signal blinked onto the display, a faint, stuttering pulse from the debris field behind them. "Survivors?" Mara asked, a thread of hope in her voice. He zoomed in, heart hammering. It wasn't a ship. It was a beacon, one of humanity's own, looping a single, chilling message. "They know! They're coming for it!" The beacon's message hung in the air like a death knell, its words looping through the Dauntless's bridge. "They know! They're coming for it!" The commander's breath caught, his mind racing to untangle the warning. Who knew? The Crenari? Someone else? And what were they coming for? The ship? The Genesis Protocol? His fingers hovered over the console, itching to demand answers from a signal that offered none. Around him, the crew froze, their eyes darting between the holodisplay and his face, waiting for him to make sense of the chaos closing in. "Amplify that signal," he snapped, his voice sharper than he intended. "Trace its origin, now." Mara's hands flew across her station, her brow furrowed as she wrestled with the flickering data. The Crenari fleet loomed closer on the display, their weapons hot, their formation tightening like a noose. 28 minutes until contact. 28 minutes until the Dauntless was reduced to ash and memory, unless he did something unthinkable. "It's coming from the debris field," Mara said, her voice tight. "Sector 7 Alpha, near the wreck of the Valiant, but it's degraded. Could be hours old, maybe days. No way to tell if whoever sent it is still alive." She looked up, her green eyes searching his. "What does it mean, sir? What do they know?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. The Valiant had been Admiral Corso's flagship, the spearhead of that doomed offensive. If the beacon was hers, if she'd survived long enough to send this. His stomach twisted. Corso had been one of the few who'd known about the Genesis Protocol. Not its details, but its existence. Had she cracked under pressure? Sold them out to buy time? Or had the Crenari torn it from her, piece by bloody piece? The thought of her broken body spilling humanity's last secret to those monsters made his blood run cold. "Commander, we need a call." Lieutenant Reza, the weapons officer, slammed a fist on his console, his dark eyes blazing. "They're in range in 25 minutes. We've got one ship, one shot at this. Do we fight or do we run?" His voice cracked, the strain of weeks on the edge breaking through. The crew turned as one, their fear and desperation a palpable weight pressing on the commander's shoulders. He wanted to tell them, wanted to confess the truth about the Genesis Protocol, to lay bare the choice that could end this, or end everything. But what would it do? Spark hope? Panic? Mutiny? He could see it now, Reza, young and brash, demanding they fire it off. Mara, steady but shaken, arguing for caution, the rest fracturing under the moral rot of it all. Number he'd carry this alone, until he had no choice. "Prep the main guns," he said instead, his tone flat, final. "Divert power to the forward shields. We're not running. Not yet." Reza nodded, diving into his controls. But Mara's gaze lingered, sharp and questioning. She knew him too well, saw the shadow behind his words. He turned away, focusing on the holo display as the Crenari closed in, their lead ships now visible as glints of cruel light against the black. The beacon's signal pulsed again, weaker now, cutting in and out. "They know. Coming. It." Static swallowed the rest, but the implication sank deep. If the Crenari had learned of the protocol, they weren't just here to finish a fight. They were here to claim a prize. A weapon like that in their hands would turn the galaxy to cinders, humanity just the first ember snuffed out. He clenched his fists, nails biting into his palms. He'd die before he let that happen. But how many others would he take with him? A sudden jolt rocked the ship, alarms blaring as the display flared with incoming fire. "They're testing us," Reza shouted. "Long-range plasma lances, shields holding at 80%. The Dauntless shuddered again, a low groan echoing through its frame. The Crenari weren't in full range yet, but they were toying with them, probing for weakness. 22 minutes left. "Return fire," the commander ordered, his voice steel. "Target their lead frigate. Give them something to think about." Reza grinned, a feral edge to it, and the ship's cannons roared to life, spitting defiance into the void. A distant bloom of fire marked a hit, but it was a drop in the ocean of the enemy's numbers. The crew cheered anyway, a ragged, desperate sound that tore at his heart. He stepped back, his mind churning. The beacon, the protocol, the Crenari. Pieces of a puzzle he couldn't solve. Not yet. But one thing was clear. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for time. Time to decide if humanity's last stand would be a blaze of glory, or a shadow that consumed them all. The Dauntless trembled as another salvo of Crenari plasma lances raked its shields, the bridge lights flickering under the strain. The commander stood rooted at the helm, his eyes locked on the holodisplay as the enemy fleet tightened its grip. 19 minutes until they were in full weapons range. 19 minutes until the Dauntless became a footnote in a war humanity was losing. The crew's ragged cheer from the last hit had faded, replaced by the hum of machinery and the sharp, uneven breaths of people staring death in the face. He could feel their hope fraying, thread by thread, and it clawed at him worse than the enemy fire. "Shields at 62%, Mara called out, her voice taut but controlled. "That frigate's limping, but they've got 10 more moving to flank us. We can't keep this up." She didn't look at him this time, her focus glued to her station. But he heard the unspoken question. What's the plan? He didn't have one, not one he could stomach saying aloud. The Genesis Protocol loomed in his mind, a dark specter whispering promises of salvation and ruin. Every second brought him closer to that choice, and every second made it harder to breathe. "Adjust course," he said, forcing his voice steady. "Swing us toward the debris field. Use the wrecks for cover. Buy us time." Mara's hands hesitated over the controls, just for a heartbeat, before she complied. The ship groaned as it banked hard, thrusters flaring to weave through the graveyard of humanity's fallen fleet. Twisted hulls and shattered engines loomed outside the viewports, a silent testament to the cost of their defiance. The Crenari fire slackened as the Dauntless slipped behind the wreck of a destroyer, its bulk absorbing a volley meant for them. "Good call," Reza muttered, his fingers still dancing over the weapons console. "Gives us a breather, maybe a shot at their flankers." He fired again, a lance of energy spearing through the void to clip a Crenari ship. It veered off, trailing sparks, but the others pressed closer, relentless. The commander nodded, but his mind was elsewhere, locked on that fading beacon signal still pulsing from the debris. "They know. They're coming for it." The words gnawed at him, a riddle wrapped in dread. If the Crenari knew about the protocol, why hadn't they obliterated the Dauntless already? Why toy with them like this? "Commander, I've got something," Mara said suddenly, her voice sharp with urgency. "The beacon. It's not just a distress call. There's a data packet buried in the signal, encrypted with coalition codes. It's small, but I can crack it if you give me a minute." Her eyes flicked to him, bright with a mix of fear and determination. He nodded, a flicker of hope sparking in his chest despite himself. "Do it! Fast!" She bent over her console, muttering to herself as she worked, while the ship jolted again under a glancing hit. "Shields at 50%, Reza barked. "They're adapting, moving to cut us off from the field." The holo display confirmed it. The Crenari were shifting, their prongs curling inward to trap the Dauntless against the debris. 16 minutes left. Time was bleeding away, and with it, any chance of escape. "Got it!" Mara's shout cut through the tension. "It's from the Valiant, Admiral Corso's signature. Timestamp's 3 days old." She paused, her face paling as she read the decrypted text. "Sir, she says the Crenari intercepted a transmission about the Genesis protocol. They don't know what it does, but they know it's on this ship. They're not here to destroy us. They're here to take us alive." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Alive, not to kill, but to capture. To tear the Dauntless apart, rip the protocol from its core, and turn it against every human world left standing. The crew went still, the weight of it sinking in. Reza swore under his breath, his hands clenching into fists. "So we're bait in a damn cage," he growled. "What's the move, Commander? Blow them to hell or go down swinging?" He didn't answer right away. His mind spun, images flashing, Corso's broken voice, the dying captain's plea, the billions of lives hanging on his next call. The Crenari wanted the protocol, but they didn't know its power. Not yet. That was his edge, thin as it was. He could activate it now, end this chase in a cataclysm that would swallow them all, enemy and ally alike. Or he could fight, delay, pray for a miracle that might never come. "Commander!" Mara's voice snapped him back. The display flared as a Crenari boarding craft detached from the lead ship, its trajectory locked on the Dauntless. "They're coming for us, now!" The holo display pulsed with the boarding craft's approach, a sleek, predatory dart cutting through the void toward the Dauntless. The commander's heart slammed against his ribs, each beat a countdown to the moment the Crenari breached their hull. 14 minutes until the main fleet's weapons range, less if those boarders got inside. The bridge was a storm of noise now, alarms shrieking, Reza barking firing solutions, Mara shouting updates as the enemy closed in. The crew's fear was a living thing, thick and choking, but beneath it burned a stubborn human fire that refused to gutter out. "Lock down the lower decks!" the commander roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Reza, redirect fire. Hit that boarding craft before it latches on. Mara, get me a path through this debris. Anything to shake them off." The orders came fast, instinctive, a lifeline to keep his mind from drowning in the choice he couldn't escape. The Genesis Protocol. It was there, always there, a shadow at the edge of every decision. Use it, and this ends, along with everything else. Hold back, and the Crenari might take it anyway, turning humanity's last hope into their doom. Reza's cannons thundered, bolts of light streaking toward the boarding craft. One hit, then another, scorching its hull. But the damn thing kept coming, weaving through the barrage with a grace that mocked their desperation. "It's shielded. Too tough for our guns," Reza snarled, slamming his console. "They'll be on us in 2 minutes." The Dauntless lurched as Mara pushed its thrusters to their limit, threading through the debris field's jagged maze. A wrecked frigate loomed ahead, and she swung them hard to port, the ship's frame screaming as it grazed the ruin's edge. Sparks flared outside the viewports, but the boarding craft stayed on their tail, relentless. "Shields at 40%, Mara reported, her voice fraying at the edges. "We're losing ground. They're too fast. Sir, we can't outmaneuver them forever." Her eyes met his, pleading for something, anything, to pull them out of this spiral. He saw the trust there, the belief that he could still save them, and it cut deeper than the Crenari's weapons ever could. She didn't know what he was holding back. None of them did. The boarding craft was close now, its grappling arms extending like claws. A shudder ran through the Dauntless as it fired anchoring lines, metal cables biting into the hull with a screech that echoed through the ship. "They've latched," Reza yelled, his hands flying to the secondary turrets. "I can't shake them. Breach in 30 seconds." The crew scrambled, grabbing rifles from the armory racks, their faces set in grim determination. They'd fight hand to hand if it came to that, but against Crenari shock troops, 7 feet of muscle and biotech, they'd be lucky to last a minute. The commander's mind raced, the beacon's warning looping through his thoughts. They know. They're coming for it. Corso's message had confirmed it. The Crenari wanted the protocol, alive and intact. They'd board, they'd kill, they'd carve through the Dauntless until they found it. Unless he stopped them. His hand hovered over the console, the access codes to the protocol burning in his memory. One command, and the engineering deck would unlock. One more, and the galaxy would burn. But the cost. God, the cost. He saw Earth's colonies, the refugee ships, the children who'd never know why the stars went dark. Could he live with that? Could he live with himself? "Sir," Mara's cry snapped him back. The holodisplay showed Crenari troops cutting through the hull, their plasma torches flaring red against the steel. "They're in. Deck 7, near the cargo bay." The ship jolted as the breach sealed behind them, the enemy now inside, stalking closer to the heart of the Dauntless. Reza grabbed a rifle, his jaw tight. "I'm heading down there. We hold them off or we die trying." He didn't wait for an order, just ran for the lift with a handful of crew trailing him, their footsteps pounding like a war drum. The commander turned to Mara, his voice low, urgent. "Get to engineering, lock it down, manual override, no exceptions. They don't get near the protocol?" She nodded, understanding flashing in her eyes, and sprinted off. Alone now on the bridge, he stared at the display, the Crenari fleet closing in, the boarders tearing through his ship. 12 minutes left. He could hear the distant clatter of gunfire, the screams of his crew as they met the enemy. This was it. The moment he'd dreaded since that dying captain's plea. His hand moved to the console, trembling, and entered the first code. The console beeped as the first code locked in, a soft chime that felt deafening in the empty bridge. The commander's hand froze above the panel, sweat beading on his brow as the weight of what came next crashed over him. One more sequence, and the Genesis protocol would wake, unleashing a fury that would erase the Crenari fleet, the Dauntless, and half this system in a blinding roar of annihilation. His chest heaved, each breath a battle against the panic clawing up his throat. He could hear the gunfire echoing through the ship, Reza and the others fighting a losing war against the Krenari borders. 10 minutes until the fleet's full range. Less until the enemy reached engineering. Time was a noose, and it was tightening. A sharp crack split the air, the comms flaring to life. "Commander, they're through Deck 7, Reza's voice rasped, punctuated by the chatter of rifles and a guttural Krenari roar. "We're falling back. Lost 3 already. They're cutting straight for engineering." The line cut out in a burst of static, leaving the commander staring at the console, the second code burning behind his eyes. He could end it now. One press and Reza's sacrifice, the crew's blood, the Krenari's hunger, all of it would vanish in a heartbeat. But so would everything else. He slammed a fist against the panel, the pain grounding him as he wrestled with the abyss staring back. The ship rocked, a deep groan shuddering through its bones as another plasma lance grazed the shields. "Shields at 28%, the automated system blared, its calm tone a cruel mockery of the chaos unfolding. He glanced at the holo display. The boarding craft had disgorged more troops, their signatures swarming Deck 6 now, 1 level below engineering. Mara was down there, alone, racing to lock the protocol away. If she failed, if they got to it first, he wouldn't just lose the ship. He'd lose humanity's soul to the enemy's hands. The comms crackled again, this time Mara's voice, breathless and strained. "Commander, I'm at the override, sealing it now, but they're close. I can hear them cutting through the bulkhead. What's the plan? Tell me you've got something." Her words trembled, not with fear, but with a desperate need to believe in him. He clenched his jaw, tasting blood where he'd bitten his lip. She didn't know about the code he'd entered, the line he'd already crossed. "Hold them off," he said, his voice rough. "Whatever it takes. I'm working on it." A lie, or maybe a prayer. He wasn't sure anymore. The display flared red as the Krenari fleet shifted, their main ships slowing, letting the boarders do the dirty work. 8 minutes left. The commander's mind spun, grasping for options. Fight on, and they'd be overrun. Run, and they'd be chased to dust. The protocol was the only card left, but playing it meant betting everything, every life, every hope, on a roll of the dice he couldn't take back. He thought of the colonies, the families huddled in bunkers, waiting for a miracle. He thought of the crew, bleeding and dying for a chance he might steal away with one command. A new sound broke through, boots on the bridge deck, heavy and deliberate. He spun, hand dropping to his sidearm, but it was too late. 3 Krenari loomed in the doorway, their biotech armor glinting under the flickering lights, their eyes glowing a sickly yellow. 7 feet of muscle and menace, each step a promise of violence. The leader growled something in their jagged tongue, a translator chip spitting out broken English. "Surrender. Give us weapon. Live." His heart stopped. They'd cut through the ship faster than he'd thought, bypassing Reza, Mara, everyone. The bridge was lost. He raised his pistol, firing twice. Crack, crack, but the shots glanced off their armor, useless as spit against steel. The leader lunged, a clawed hand smashing the gun from his grip and pinning him to the console. Pain exploded in his chest, ribs creaking under the pressure, but he didn't scream. Not yet. "Weapon!" the Krenari snarled, its breath hot and rancid. "Now!" The commander's eyes flicked to the console, the first code still glowing green. One more, and it'd be over. For them, for him, for everything. His hand twitched, inches from the panel, as the sounds of battle faded below. Reza's silence, Mara's, the crew's, all gone. He stared into the Krenari's eyes, defiance burning through the fear. "You'll never have it," he spat, and lunged for the keys. The commander's fingers grazed the console, a heartbeat from the second code, when the Crenari's claw slammed down, pinning his arm with a crunch that ripped a gasp from his throat. Pain seared through him, white-hot and blinding, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The Genesis Protocol was all that stood between the Crenari and the end of everything human. With his free hand, he clawed at the panel, smearing blood across the keys as the leader's grip tightened, its yellow eyes narrowing with fury. "No," it growled, the translator chip spitting the word like a curse. "You die first." The other two Crenari closed in, their weapons humming, a low, menacing drone that promised a slow end. The bridge was a tomb now, its flickering lights casting shadows over the holodisplay where the fleet's countdown ticked relentlessly. 6 minutes until full range. The Dauntless shuddered under another distant hit, its shields crumbling, its hull groaning like a beast in its death throes. The commander's mind screamed with the weight of it, Reza's silence, Mara's unanswered comms, the crew's blood soaking the decks below. He'd failed them, all of them, but he wouldn't fail this. He twisted, ignoring the snap of bone in his pinned arm, and threw his weight against the Crenari leader. It barely budged, a wall of biotech and hate, but the move bought him a second, just enough to slam his palm on the console's edge, triggering an emergency override. The panel locked, the first code blinking red, inaccessible without his voice print. A small victory, a petty one, but it was something. The Crenari roared, its claw slashing across his chest, tearing through fabric and flesh. Blood sprayed, hot and coppery, and he hit the floor, vision swimming as the world tilted. "Fool!" the leader hissed, looming over him. "We take ship, we take weapon, you break for nothing." Its boot pressed on his shattered arm, grinding down until a scream tore free despite his clenched teeth. The other two moved to the console, their claws tapping at the locked controls, growling in frustration. They didn't have the codes. Not yet. But they'd find a way, cut through the ship, rip out its guts, unless he stopped them here. Through the haze of pain, a sound reached him, muffled, distant, but real. Gunfire, shouts, human shouts. His heart lurched, a flicker of hope piercing the dark. "Reza!" he rasped, barely audible. The Crenari leader's head snapped up, its eyes darting to the doorway as the noise grew louder, closer. A grenade's sharp crump echoed, followed by a Crenari howl cut short. The commander's lips twitched, a grim smile breaking through the blood. Someone was still fighting. The leader barked an order, and one of the Crenari peeled off, vanishing into the corridor. The other kept hammering at the console, its claws sparking against the steel. 4 minutes left. The commander dragged himself up, leaning against the helm, every breath a knife in his ribs. His pistol lay across the room. Useless, but the override had bought time. Time for whoever was out there to reach him. Time to finish this. The bridge door exploded inward, a flash of light and heat as Reza stumbled through, his armor scorched, his rifle blazing. Behind him came 3 others, faces smeared with soot and blood, their eyes wild with the kind of rage that only survival breeds. The Crenari at the console spun, its weapon shrieking as it fired. But Reza was faster. 3 shots to its chest dropped it in a twitching heap. The leader roared, charging, and the room erupted in chaos. Gunfire, claws, screams. The commander lunged for the console, pain be damned, his good hand fumbling for the voice print mic. "Authorization, Delta 9 Alpha," he choked out, blood bubbling in his throat. The Crenari leader broke free, Reza's shots glancing off its armor, and barreled toward him. 2 minutes left. The fleet was closing, the borders were dying, and the protocol was waking. 7-2 Omega, he finished, the console flaring green as the second code accepted. A deep hum vibrated through the Dauntless, the Genesis protocol stirring in its cage. The Crenari's claw caught his shoulder, hurling him back, but it was too late. The system was online, a third command away from detonation. Reza tackled the leader, both crashing to the floor in a tangle of fury, while the surviving crew fired on the last Crenari straggler bursting through the door. The commander crawled to the helm, his vision fading, the countdown at 1 minute. "Hold them," he whispered to Reza, to himself, to the ghosts of the fallen. One more step, one more choice. The Dauntless trembled as the Genesis protocol's hum grew into a bone-deep roar, the bridge awash in the console's sickly green glow. The commander clung to the helm, blood pooling beneath him, his shattered arm useless, his chest a mess of torn flesh. 50 seconds until the Crenari fleet's full range. Reza wrestled the Crenari leader across the floor, grunting as its claws raked his armor, while the last 2 crew members fired on the straggler, their rifles spitting defiance. The air stank of ozone and death, every second a knife's edge. "Commander, do it!" Reza shouted, pinning the Crenari's arm as it snapped at his throat. His voice cracked, raw with exhaustion and rage. "End this!" The leader thrashed, its translator spitting garbled threats, but the commander barely heard. His eyes locked on the console, the third code trembling on his lips. One word, and the system would ignite, obliterating the fleet, the Dauntless, everything in a cataclysmic flash. His hand shook, hovering over the mic, the weight of billions crushing him. The straggler fell, a bullet through its skull, and the crew turned their guns on the leader. Shots rang out, but its armor held, and it hurled Reza off, lunging for the commander. He ducked, pain screaming through him, and croaked into the mic. "Authorization, Epsilon 5. The Crenari's claw swiped, missing by inches, and Reza tackled it again, buying him seconds. 30 ticks left. The fleet's signatures loomed on the holo display, weapons hot, ready to finish what the boarders couldn't. "Gamma 9, he finished, voice breaking. The console pulsed red, a final prompt flashing. Confirm detonation? His finger hovered over the button, vision blurring. He saw Mara's face, silent since engineering fell. The colony's children, the crew's blood, the Crenari's relentless hunger. This was it. Humanity's bold move, a gamble on ashes. He pressed down. Nothing happened. A shrill beep cut through the chaos. The system stalled, a failsafe blinking. Manual activation required in engineering. His heart sank, a guttural curse escaping him. The protocol was alive but tethered, useless without someone down there to flip the switch. Mara was gone. He was trapped. The Crenari leader broke free again, Reza's grip faltering, and it charged, eyes blazing with triumph. 10 seconds. The fleet's weapons locked. The commander met Reza's gaze, a silent apology in his eyes, and rasped, "Fight!" Reza nodded, grim, and fired point blank into the Crenari's face. It staggered, roaring, as the crew piled on, a last desperate stand. The commander slumped against the console, the countdown hitting 0. The holo display flared. Crenari fire incoming. A voice crackled through the comms, faint, alive. "Commander, it's Mara. I'm in engineering. They're dead. I can do it." His breath caught, hope and dread colliding. "Mara, wait." Too late. The Dauntless shuddered, a blinding light swallowing the bridge. The light consumed everything. Blinding, searing, a silent scream that drowned the Dauntless's bridge in white. The commander threw an arm over his eyes, his broken body braced against the console as the ship bucked like a dying animal. Mara's voice lingered in his ears, her last words, "I can do it," cut off by static and the roar of the Genesis protocol waking at her hands. The holo display was gone, fried in the surge, but he didn't need it to know what was happening. The hum had become a pulse, a heartbeat of annihilation rippling out from engineering, tearing through steel and void alike. "Reza!" he shouted, voice hoarse, but the chaos swallowed it. The Krenari leader's roar choked off mid-lunge, its massive form staggering as the floor heaved. Reza and the two crewmen clung to their stations, their faces pale, eyes wide with the same question he couldn't answer. Did we win, or did we lose everything? The light pulsed again, brighter, and a deep, resonant crack split the air. The sound of the Dauntless breaking apart, or the universe itself, he couldn't tell. Then, silence. A stillness so absolute it felt like death. The commander's vision cleared, spots dancing as he blinked at the wreckage of the bridge. The Krenari leader lay crumpled, its armor cracked, yellow eyes dim. Reza knelt nearby, chest heaving, blood streaking his face, while the others slumped against the walls, alive but hollowed out. The console flickered back to life, its screen fractured but functional, showing nothing. No Krenari fleet, no debris field, just a void, black and endless, stretching where stars once burned. "Mara," he whispered, dread coiling in his gut. He stumbled to the comms, ignoring the fire in his ribs, and keyed the line. "Mara, report, now," Static answered, cold and final. He tried again, then again, each silence a hammer blow. She'd done it, flipped the switch in engineering, unleashed the protocol. But at what cost? He sank to his knees, the truth sinking with him. The Krenari were gone, their fleet vaporized in the cascade. But so was she. So was half the system, maybe more. "Commander," Reza rasped, dragging himself over. "The sensors, they're picking up something. Weak, but there." He pointed to the display, a faint blip pulsing at the edge of the void. The commander squinted, hope warring with exhaustion. "A ship? Survivors?" He keyed the scanners, hands trembling, and a signal broke through. Human, coalition-coded, broadcasting a single word. Dauntless. His breath caught. Someone was out there calling for them. "Helm still responsive," one of the crewmen croaked, a young ensign with soot-streaked cheeks. "We can move. Barely." The commander nodded, pulling himself up, every muscle screaming. "Set course. Get us to that signal." The Dauntless groaned as its thrusters sputtered to life, limping through the emptiness left by the protocol's wrath. The void outside was a graveyard. No trace of the Krenari, no hint of the worlds they'd threatened. Just silence and that lone blip. Hours later they found it, a battered refugee ship, crammed with survivors from the Orion Verge. Faces pressed against viewports, wide-eyed, disbelieving. The comms crackled as a woman's voice came through, shaky with tears. "We saw the light, thought it was the end. You saved us." The commander closed his eyes. The words, a balm and a blade. Saved them. But not Mara. Not the crew bleeding out below. Not the billions caught in the protocol's reach. Reza clapped a hand on his shoulder, silent, steady. "We held the line," he said, voice low. "That's what matters." The commander didn't reply, staring at the void where stars once shone. Humanity's bold move had worked. Crippled the Krenari, bought time for the remnants to fight another day. But the cost was a scar on his soul, a shadow he'd carry forever. "Plot a course home," he said finally, turning from the display. "Whatever's left of it." The Dauntless limped on, a broken ship carrying broken people, its lone light flickering in the dark. The war wasn't over, but for now they'd survived. That had to be enough.